We have the Planning and Zoning Board meeting of September 13th, 2021. Sherry, will you call the roll?
Yes, sir. Mr. Schmitz?
Yes.
Mr. Lilly?
Yes.
Ms. Tornatori?
Yes.
Mr. Horian?
Here.
Mr. Delange?
Here.
And Mr. Brzezinski is also in attendance.
Here.
The next item is approval of the Planning and Zoning minutes of July 12th.
I make a motion we approve.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay, action items. First one is the development agreement amendment application. Stuart?
Good morning, Mr. Chair, board members. For the record, my name is Stuart Cruz, City Planner for the City of Daytona Beach Shores. Mr. Chair and board members, I just wanted to let you know that this particular item, staff and the applicant, we are requesting that the meeting be continued to a date certain, which would be October 12th at 8:30 p.m. And the reason for that, board members, is because the development agreement, whenever there's an amendment to that development agreement, typically all the parties involved have to sign and have to actually concur with the amendment. So far, we've had 3 signatures on the applicant side, and there's one outstanding signature that we need to get our concurrence. And the reason why we haven't gotten that yet, or the applicant hasn't gotten that yet, is because the property is actually under contract right now and going through ownership transfer. So the applicant and the city staff are requesting that the board grants a continuance to October 12th.
Do we need to make a motion on that?
I got a question before.
Okay.
Is this the same property that a year and a half ago we approved townhouses on? I wasn't sure.
So, board members, you may recall that about a year ago, there was an attempted comprehensive plan amendment to provide additional entitlements for this property. The property is in the 3800 block west side of South Atlantic Avenue. It was actually annexed from the county in 2015, and it was rezoned for duplexes in 2016. And in 2020, the owner attempted a comprehensive plan amendment, but it died in the process.
So now it's being sold as individual lots?
So, yes, exactly. So it has been subdivided into 4 lots, and 3 of them have been sold and 1 is under contract.
Okay.
And it's one of the new owners that is actually making the application, or the primary lead of the application.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
So yes, we'll need a motion, a second, and a vote. So you can continue this matter.
Do we have a motion to approve the continuance of the item A?
I make a motion to accept the continuance.
Second.
Sherry, would you call the roll?
Mr. Horian?
Yes.
Ms. Tornatori?
Yes.
Mr. Delange?
Yes.
Mr. Lilly?
Sure.
Mr. Schmitz?
Yes. Okay, our second item is ordinance 2021-09, property rights element, comprehensive plan amendment. Stuart, you're up again. Oh, you didn't sit down.
Just waiting.
Yes. The computer's running slow to catch up.
Roseanne voted twice.
Say it again.
He was up there twice, she voted twice.
Well, we know what county she's from.
Board members, again, this is Stuart with the City of Daytona Beach Shores, City Planner. The ordinance that you see before you at this moment is ordinance 2021-09. It's a comprehensive plan amendment to create a property rights element, and I'll tell you all about it. So, so the purpose of this amendment, as I mentioned, is to create a property rights element as not required by Florida law. As we know, every year the Florida legislature gets together in Tallahassee, and they pass certain bills and whatnot. And if it's at the governor's pleasure, he goes ahead and signs those. And so there was a House Bill 59, that was passed and signed by the governor during the last legislative session, which now requires that every city and county, every local government in the state of Florida essentially create what's called a property rights element in its comprehensive plan. So the comprehensive plan, as you may recall, is the overarching land development and growth management constitution of the city, and the zoning regulations and the code itself, the land development code, actually implements those policies within the comprehensive plan. Well, the Florida legislature and the governor basically said that we had to add a new chapter to this comprehensive plan, and that chapter would be called the property rights elements. So the whole intention of adding this property rights elements is to essentially remind government entities that whenever they make land use decisions, they have to essentially respect, things that we already know, that property rights here in the United States, have rights that are judicially protected and constitutionally protected as well. So the bill actually includes model language, and the language that you see before you this morning was actually included from that bill. So the legislature said that the city and local governments essentially have to adopt that comprehensive plan amendment at the next time they update their comprehensive plan, or at the next time they do what's called an evaluation and appraisal audit of their comprehensive plan, which is typically done every 7 to 10 years. And in addition to that, you might have seen in your staff report, I believe it was in the synopsis, that Section 5B4 of the Stipulated Settlement Agreement between the City of Daytona Beach Shores and 2025 South Atlantic Avenue LLC, which is the owner of the Treasure Island properties, that particular section that I just referenced stipulates that the city adopts prior to or concurrent with the Treasure Island Comprehensive Plan Amendment, the subject property rights element amendment. And so, as you may have seen in your agenda item, the third item in the agenda, which is coming up next, is the Treasure Island Comprehensive Plan Amendment, and hence, that's the reason why we're here today. So this is just a quick summary. Actually, it's not a summary, it's the actual language that would be added into comprehensive plan. So the new chapter would be this half a page that we would add into the comprehensive plan. And essentially, the main objective, as it mentions there under objective 12-1.1, says the following policies are to ensure that private property rights shall be considered in local decision making. And as you can see, all those things that are documented there, they're already judicially acknowledged in the courts, and they're enshrined in the Constitution as well. So basically, all we're doing is, all the legislature asks us to do is to, double up on our efforts, if you want to call it that. So the conclusion of this particular amendment would be that we would adopt the property rights element. The property rights element that you see before you is actually the model language that was in the House bill. It is consistent with the statute that is now codified, that House bill, and it is consistent with the city's comprehensive plan, and as such, staff is recommending approval. Any questions for me?
I have one. What would happen if we didn't approve what the state's already approved?
Okay, so
It's just a curiosity.
Okay, so this is a mandate by the state. If we were to not do that, the Treasure, as an example, the Treasure Island Comprehensive Plan Amendment that you see on the agenda that's coming up next, we would not be able to adopt it.
But
Or any future comprehensive plan amendment, we would not be able to adopt.
what would be the penalty from the state for not going along with them?
Well,
Usually there's something.
The only penalty is that we wouldn't be able to provide new entitlements, we wouldn't be able to change any new policies or objectives or goals in our comprehensive plan, and obviously that would impact our land development code as well and the future development of our city.
Okay.
So that would be the penalty. We wouldn't be sanctioned unless we were to go ahead and try to make land use changes without adopting a comprehensive plan amendment.
Thank you.
I have a statement or a comment for our chairperson. Reading this reminded me that it's been a while since we've had an update from our lawyer about all the current laws, and I thought it would be a good opportunity, and my suggestion is that we have a workshop in the next couple of months to bring us up to date on any of the changes, because we haven't had one in over a year and a half, and there's been some changes. So reading all this, it made me think we probably need some sort of workshop.
A month or two ago, I put something on the city council agenda, and we do the same thing here if you'd like.
Great. It's up to the chairperson.
I could just put it on part of the regular, I mean, we don't necessarily need to do it as a workshop unless that's your pleasure. I can put it as part of the regular agenda for next month if you'd like.
Okay. About how long was that on the city one? 2 hours?
We could probably wrap it up in half hour to an hour.
Perfect. Then it can just be an item on the agenda. It's unlike the 4-hour one we sat through.
That's true.
Okay.
Having said that, I'll make a motion to recommend approval of ordinance 2021-09 as presented.
Second.
Sherry, would you take the roll?
Yes, sir. Mr. Deloche?
Yes.
Mr. Horian?
Yes.
Ms. Tornatore?
Yes.
Mr. Lilly?
Yes.
Mr. Schmitz?
Yes. Okay, our next item involves Stuart once again. It's ordinance 2021-10, Treasure Island Stipulated Settlement Agreement Comprehensive Plan Amendment at 2025 South Atlantic Avenue. Stuart?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So again, this is ordinance 2021-10, Comprehensive Plan Amendment, Future Land Use Element to create the Treasure Island redevelopment overlay. And the purpose of this amendment is essentially, the origin and the source of this amendment, of course, is the stipulated settlement agreement between the city that was passed and adopted by the city of Daytona Beach Shores earlier this year, August, I believe. And the agreement, of course, is between the city of Daytona Beach Shores and 2025 South Atlantic Avenue LLC, which is the owner of the Treasure Island properties concerned. And the goals of this amendment is essentially to establish a development standard framework that would foster and lead to the redevelopment of the properties in question, and also on the city's side to create a development opportunity for the property owner in which immediate demolition would be feasible and cost-effective. Demolition of the existing Treasure Island shell that has been there since 2004, of course. So the property owner applicant is 2025 South Atlantic Avenue. The location of the property, there's 3 tracks that are, well, 4 to be precise, and they basically range from 2025 to 2041 South Atlantic Avenue, and those are on the east side. That's the Treasure Island proper and the Sunny Shores property. And then on the west side of South Atlantic Avenue, you have 4 lots in one track that's from 2030 South Atlantic to 2038 South Atlantic. And then, of course, there's 2 lots, which is in the Frail Avenue tract, which is one of the side streets when you go down Park, which is just north of, kind of north to Catty Corner, I would say, to the Treasure Island property. So the size of the property, when you add all the acreage together, is 4.89 acres. And there's also an additional 1.58 beachside acres, meaning from the seawall to the mean high water mark. And the reason why we mention this is because it's articulated in the development agreement that was adopted in 2015. So there's additional density entitlements that are on top of the east side properties as a result of this provision that's in the development agreement. And so we have to add that into the entitlements when we calculate the current entitlements and also what the impact will be from this comprehensive plan amendment in terms of the difference for the new development. So the proposed amendment, of course, is the creation of the redevelopment overlay objectives and policies that will encourage and foster the redevelopment of these properties. And the current entitlement, as you may have seen in the staff report, is 434 units. The proposed entitlement will result in an additional 66 multifamily residential units, and the overall development is capped at 500 units. So this is what the comprehensive plan amendment would look like if it were to be adopted by the city and approved by the Pollution Growth Management Commission and the state of Florida. And what I've done is, in this presentation, is I've kind of summarized each of them. And the first one is that the city shall promote the redevelopment of the Treasure Island properties by adopting a redevelopment overlay. That's the primary objective. And then there's 4 implementing policies. And the first one is that the redevelopment overlay shall allow development flexibility and a mixture of uses within the district. And basically what that means is that, that on the properties, specifically the east side properties, there will be able to be a combination of uses vertically and horizontally if desired by the property owner. The second policy, implementing policy, is that the development within the redevelopment overlay is intended to provide for high quality architecture and sound planning practices. So what that means essentially is that the product should be a beautiful product, and that the product, in terms of the design and the construction, shall consider all things that are standard in planning, meaning that it's not going to create traffic impacts or any kind of facility impacts in a negative or deleterious manner. The third implementing policy is that the density within the redevelopment overlay may be transferred from parcel to parcel with certain restrictions. And so what this means is that, for example, and this is intent as far as I understand it, that the density that's on the west side of South Atlantic Avenue and on the Frail Avenue parcel can be transferred over to the east side so that the east side can have more units for redevelopment to make the project work. And the certain restrictions that you may have seen in your staff report and in the actual policy itself is that essentially the city council has to approve it by resolution, and that the properties that are called the send-in parcels, meaning the west side properties that will be losing the density, that will be essentially enshrined in the official records of Volusia County. And so they wouldn't be able to go back and redevelop those properties with density, with units or whatever have you. And the final implementing policy is that the redevelopment overlay, properties within the redevelopment overlays shall receive a 25% density bonus if enrolled in the city's alternative tax relief program. However, the total count shall not exceed 500. So again, you see that 500 unit cap, the 25% density bonus. After we've done the math, it actually doesn't add up to 25%. I believe it adds up to maybe about 14 or 15%. And what the alternative tax relief program is, for those of you who may not recall, it's one of these economic incentives programs that the city council has adopted to kind of encourage redevelopment within the city. And I'm not going to really get into that too much, aside from just saying that it's part of the city's overarching economic development program. So this is an aerial view of the properties concerned. As I mentioned, there's 3 to 4 tracks. You have the east side properties. If I can find my mouse. You have the east side properties, that we all know about, Treasure Island, and then the old Sunny Shores parcel, and then the west side property right here. There's 4 lots over here. They're currently vacant. The Treasure Island proper is the only one that actually has a structure, and that's the 11-story structure shell that we keep talking about, and that the city would like to, and the city and the property owner, I presume, would like to see demolished. And it is stipulated in a settlement agreement that if this comprehensive plan amendment is adopted and approved by the government entities concerned, that structure will be demolished within 120 days. And so you can also see on the north side, on the upper left side, the Frail Avenue, the Frail Street properties that I was referencing earlier. So these are street views of the property. I couldn't get one for the Frail Street, but as you can see, the 2025 is the South Atlantic is the current Treasure Island property, and to the right, upper right, you see the Sunny Shores vacant property, and then to the bottom you see the vacant property on the west side. So just in terms of the area future land use entitlements and the future land use map, you'll see that on the east side, you see the properties they have a future land use classification of high intensity. On the west side is tourist-oriented commercial, and the Frail Avenue, you can't really see too good, but it's basically low-density residential. And the reason why we need to note this is because those are the designations that help in the math. I don't want to call it calculus, but in the math in terms of determining what the current entitlements are. So this is a summary table of the existing and potential entitlement. As you can see, when you work out the math, you see there's a total of 434 maximum density within the entire development site, meaning among the 4 tracks that we have been talking about today. And so the effect of the new proposed policy 1-1.7.3, which is a transfer density or the density transfer policy, essentially what that means is the 6 units that are entitled on the Frail Street property and on the west side South Atlantic Avenue property, that those 6 units, 6 and 35 units, meaning 41, can be transferred over to the east side for the redevelopment of the property.
Very clear.
So again, when you look at the overall density that's associated with the 4 tracks, the number is 434. That's what the existing and potential entitlement is. When you add the 25%, so the third column from the right, you basically get 109 additional units, but there is a cap, as we mentioned earlier, and that's in the last column to the right, which caps the overall density or entitlement to 500 units. So even though the total maximum density, when you apply the 25%, would add up to 543 units, it's only 500 units that this comprehensive plan amendment would permit on the development site. And so the net change is 66 units. So what you see in your staff report, and I'm not going to go over everything here, board members, is we're required to do an adequate public facility analysis. And what you can see is that the major public facilities, including public school, generation, recreation, solid waste, potable water, sanitary, sewer, all the potential theoretical impacts that would be generated traffic, there exists enough capacity and adequate capacity to substantiate and to actually support the additional 66 units that would be created as a result of this comprehensive plan amendment. And the details, of course, are in the staff report. So we're also required to do certain analyses in terms of land use compatibility and internal consistency, meaning that the proposed amendment is consistent with other policies, goals, objectives within the city's comprehensive plan. There's also a statutory requirement with regards to urban sprawl, and as you can tell, those of you who are very familiar with urban sprawl, that's typically on the fringe area or in the rural areas of urban jurisdictions. And we're here in Daytona Beach Shores, so that's not an issue. And then there's additional statutes that are outlined in your staff report. Staff has done an analysis, and the applicant has done an analysis as well. And we concur with the analysis that the applicant has done. And as I mentioned, staff did its own analysis to verify consistency with the relative statutory requirements. And as you can see, that they're all met in staff's opinion. So the proposed amendment is consistent with controlling law, including but not limited to section 163, 3177 of the Florida statutes, and all the enabling legislation, and the City of Daytona Beach Shores Comprehensive Plan, and the Volusia Growth Management Commission consistency certification requirements, and as such, staff is recommending approval of the proposed amendment. If there's any questions for staff, I'll be happy to take those, and I know there's a team here from the applicant's side as well.
Any questions from the board?
I have two questions. You stated that once we approve this amendment, that they were going to be able to tear down the existing shell building. Isn't it upon the approval of the Volusia County Growth Management Commission as well?
Yes, and actually, thank you for reminding that. There was one slide that I forgot. So in terms of future actions, the next action will be by the City Council itself, in which they accept and transmit this comprehensive plan amendment, and that's going to be September 28th, 2021 at 6 p.m. And what we do with the transmittal is that we send it to the Volusia Growth Management Commission for consistency certification, and we also send it to the relevant state agencies that are required to review comprehensive plan amendments, and they also will review it, and if approved by the VGMC and the state agencies, then the City Council will be allowed, pursuant to state law, to actually adopt the comprehensive plan amendment. And so that's the reason why you see the TBAs there. So whenever the City Council formally adopts it is when it's legally allowed to adopt it. And then within 120 days, we should see the demolition of that particular structure.
My second question is that we've approved for future land use on the western side parking, but it's my understanding that there's going to be retail stores as well.
So I'll let the applicant speak to that. We haven't approved anything as yet for the west side or even the east side. The entitlements are what the entitlements are. This particular comprehensive plan amendment is supposed to be able to foster the redevelopment of all the properties. The uses that you saw in the table that I referenced earlier were proposed use. This particular comprehensive plan amendment creates a framework in which the developer has the ability to move around things and to propose things that would be consistent with the comprehensive plan amendment that you see before you today. So nothing is set in stone as to what exactly is going to go there. At the comprehensive plan stage, we typically don't, deal with that. What we deal with at this level is a more overarching policy framework creation that would lead to future development and growth.
So they will be coming back with a site plan for your review. This isn't that. So you'll still get eyes on the project in the future. This is just laying the groundwork to allow us to bring that back to you.
Correct.
Any other comments from board members?
I'm excited.
Seeing none, do we have a motion?
I make a motion to approve.
They're gonna talk for.
Only if you want us. Let me introduce us anyway. Rob Merrill for the record with Cop Cole.
149 South Ridgewood. Jessica Gow is here with me from Copco. Joe Hopkins from the Performance Group. We spent a great deal of time working with your staff, including the city attorney and the planning staff. Stuart's one of the best in the business, so his summary for you today is all I need to say. We have any questions for us? This is basically a first step in a lot of steps along the way for this developer to come in and demolish the structure as everybody wants. And I'll apologize to everybody ahead of time publicly for having to endure this blighted part of town for so long. So what you've got is a developer that's willing. He's got a very short timeline. This is part of the beginning of that timeline. As the city attorney mentioned, we will be back with plans. If we get to the point where we're doing anything other than what's been generally described here, including when we do that, you'll see it. So you guys will have a chance to take a look at it. And any questions for me? Jessica and Joe are kind of the brains in the operation. They know all the numbers, et cetera. If you have any questions about all the numbers in the packet, they can help you with that. But otherwise, here to answer any questions for you guys.
I have one for Stuart. What happens if they don't start working in 120 days, tearing this place down?
I'll actually defer that to the city attorney.
I figured you would.
Questions?
So we all understand, the 120-day clock doesn't start until the comp plan amendment is adopted, which will be probably several months from now because the VGMC and the state both have their reviews before we can do that. But once that clock starts, they'll have to pull their permit and get the demolition completed within the 120 days. If they don't, we have provisions in the contract that they've signed that would allow us to go to the special magistrate to get an order, essentially which would allow us to do it and then to lien them if they don't do it. But we have every expectation that they will once they're able to. And so we'd rather not have to do it ourselves, but we can and will if we need to.
I've looked at that property for 15, 16 years, and the city's gotten BS from owners and property owners, and it's a real sore spot in my mind. And I'll tell you something, if you don't tear it down, I'm going to call some boys from New York, and we're going to take it down.
Well, this agreement's got some teeth in it, so as
I'll vote for you to tear it down, but then I want to look at the plans when they come in before those are.
Sure. And again, we apologize once more.
If you weren't the cause, then that's no problem. But I just want to let you know, most of us feeling.
I live on this island too my whole life, so I feel your pain.
Thank you.
Any other comments from the board? We had a motion to approve. Do we have a second?
Second?
Sherry, would you take the roll?
Yes, sir. Ms. Tornatori?
Yes.
Mr. Horian?
Yes.
Mr. Delage?
Yes.
Mr. Lilly?
Yes.
Mr. Schmitz?
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, our next item is a Quadside judicial hearing. Open that hearing, and I'll ask if any of the members of the board have any ex parte communications.
No.
Been to the property though.
Yeah, I drove past the property just to see where it was at. Okay.
Quite nice.
Staff presentation then. Stuart of the city.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. For the record, my name is Stuart Cruz, city planner with the city of Dayton Beach, Shores. John, do you need to swear me in or anything, or no?
Yeah, I mean, this is a quasi-judicial hearing. I'll need to swear in anybody who's planning on speaking. So if there's an applicant here who's going to speak or members of the public, if y'all would stand and raise your right hand. You swear or affirm to say the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
Do.
Thank you.
Thanks, John. Thank you again, Mr. Chair, board members. For the record, my name is Stuart Cruz, city planner with the city of Daytona Beach Shores. I'm a certified planner with the American Institute of Certified Planners. The application that you see before you today is ZV 1202117, and the subject location is 2711, I have South Peninsula Drive, South Atlantic Avenue. I apologize. What does the agenda say?
South Atlantic.
Okay. Thank goodness.
The one that drove fast.
You didn't go to 27?
No, I didn't.
Yeah, so the applicant owner is Chaya K. Nathu Revocable Living Trust. The property size is 0.41 of an acre, and the property is approximately 50 by 359, according to the property appraiser's website. So the zoning of the property is RSF-1, which is our urban single-family residential detached district, and the future land use for the property is low-density residential, and the property is currently vacant. The property owner's intent is to construct a new single-family residence on the property, and the requested variance is to allow a 6.5-foot side yard setback on the north and south sides of the property in lieu of the required 10-foot setback pursuant to section 14-16.4 of the Land Development Code, the city's Land Development Code. So in terms of due public notice and review by staff, those have all been done, and the evidence of the due public notice has been submitted to the record. This is an aerial view or location map of the property. As you can see from this view, and if you've driven by it, you'll know that the property is actually the third property south of Frank Rendon Park. And from the community center we are today, it's basically about 0.9 miles if you were to hit it through South Atlantic Avenue. This is an aerial view, a 2021 aerial view of the property. As you can see, it's vacant. You can see that there was former development on the property. You can see it through the slab and the driveway that exists there today. This is a street view of the property. And this particular exhibit here shows, it's a zoning map, and it shows what the zoning is of the property, which is RSF-1, as I mentioned earlier. So when you look in the city's code, section 14-16, under the RSF-1 zoning regulations, you'll see that the side yard setback is 10 feet. The requested variance is 6.5 feet, so the difference would be 3.5 feet. So basically, they want to they want to be able to build a structure that is 3.5 feet more than what is required by the city's code. So this is an exhibit of the proposed plan. And again, this just shows the building core or the building footprint relative to the property line and what that distance would be on the north and the south side. This is an artist rendering provided by the applicant of the single-family structure that would be built. And this here is an aerial view of the property when it actually had another single-family structure on the property, and this was taken from the property appraiser's website, and this structure existed 2006, and it was demoed around 2007 or so. And what you can see is that the property is basically right on the property line on the south side, and just a few feet off, around 5 feet or so on the north side. So board members, you may recall that section 14-63.8A of the city's Land Development Code prescribes the evaluation criteria that the board should consider when granting a variance. And what I have here, I mean, I have it detailed in your staff report, but what I have here is a summary table. And the summary criteria, the first one is that special conditions or circumstances unique to the property exist. And so when it comes to the side yard setbacks, and when it comes to the property itself, staff believes that because the property is 50 feet wide, and that the property was actually platted back in the late 1800s, and the city's Land Development Code, which requires this 85-foot wide property, that there is a unique circumstance in this case, and a special condition that exists in this case, because out of the 31 properties or parcels or lots that are on the east side, there's only 8 of them that are like that. And out of the 8 of them, this is the only one that isn't developed. So in staff's view, this is a special or unique circumstance. So the second criterion is that the special conditions or circumstance are not self-imposed or primarily economic or financial in nature. And staff believes that, again, the property was platted in late 1800s, and the development standards were adopted in 1993. And so, as a result, this has nothing to do with the property owner in terms of the way the lot was platted relative to the code today. The third criterion is that the interpretation and enforcement of the regulations would deprive the applicant of zoning entitlements. Staff believes that because 75% of the lots on the east side of South Atlantic Avenue are more than 50 feet wide, and when I say more than 50 feet wide, I mean anywhere from 100 to 60 feet wide. Those properties are able to construct a wider building and able to be benefited in a way which they can provide a development on their property for the use of their property in a way that is amenable to them, whereas this property would be forced to build a narrower building, and when you look at the percentage-wise in terms of the setbacks that are allowed, you'll notice that the building will obviously be thinner. And so the property owner would not be able to enjoy that similar benefit in terms of having a wider building with other properties in the same zoning district, and that's about 75% of the properties in this block. So the fourth criteria is that minimum variance. A minimum variance is needed. This is the minimum variance that would be needed. The applicant has attested to such. He's already drawn plans, from what I understand, for this particular development. And staff was unable to identify any other variances that would be needed for the development of this property. The fifth criterion is that the variance would not authorize or extend existing nonconformities or things that are inconsistent with the code. As you know, the property is vacant, and so there's no nonconformities that the staff is aware of, and so no additional nonconformities would be extended or authorized. The sixth criterion is that the proposed variance is in harmony with the intent of the Land Development Code, would not be injurious to the area, and would not authorize an unpermitted use. The use that is proposed is for a single-family residence. The proposed variance is consistent with the city, with the intent of the city's Land Development Code, in the sense that a residential development would go on the property. It wouldn't be an adverse land use, such as a manufacturing plant or anything to that effect. So in staff's opinion, we could not find anything that would be considered injurious to the area by granting this variance. And the final one, of course, is consistent with the comprehensive plan. The variance, if authorized, would not be inconsistent with the city's comprehensive plan. So when you look at the summary table, in staff's opinion, this is staff's opinion, all the criteria have been met, and as such, staff is recommending approval as presented. If there's any questions for staff, I'll be happy to take those. I know that the applicant is here and the owner is here as well, and I believe one of the neighbors is here as well.
Pretty cut and dry.
Any discussion?
Yes.
Beautiful place.
Setback from the ocean. Does that meet the requirement? Because I think the line has been changed since.
Yeah, so the minimum setback would be 50 feet, or it would be the building line, the DEP building line.
Ocean construction setback line.
Correct. So the minimum setback that you'll see on this site would be 50 feet from what the coastal construction setback line is, and that's the one that's typically in the transition area between where the dunes are and where the beach is and where the upland property is. So 50 feet from there is going to be the minimum setback that's required. However, if the building line for the adjacent properties are further west, the DEP and the city would require that the east face of that building is pushed back further west as well to match up and line up with the neighboring properties. So this structure itself would not be more east than the adjacent properties.
So you still can't do any rentals in that unit, that property?
So the city of Daytona Beach Shores is precluded under state law from regulating residential short-term rentals. And I don't know if you want me to explain everything, but basically some jurisdictions can and some jurisdictions can't. We cannot, because at the time when the legislature and the governor signed the law into effect in 2011, the city of Daytona Beach Shores did not have existing short-term rental regulations on the books. And so the way the legislation was written was that if you don't have anything in the books, you can't create new legislation, you can't regulate it. But other jurisdictions, like parts of Daytona and elsewhere in the county, they already had legislation on the books prior to 2011. And so the statute that was adopted allowed them to continue to regulate it as long as it doesn't become more imposing. Did I say that right, John?
Yes.
Okay.
The bottom line is the city didn't have any regulations in 2011, and therefore we can't do so now.
If I remember correctly, there's 31 houses in that area.
Yes.
I thought there was a deed restriction, that you can't have any businesses in that location. Have you ever looked at that? 'Cause I've seen it, but it was been a long time ago.
Yeah, typically cities, you know, and I'll defer to John if he wants to, you know, but typically, you know, the city, unless the deed restriction is something that's required by the city or legislation that the city enacted, we typically don't get into deed restrictions. I've always heard of that, but I've never seen it. And what I can tell you is that based on my evaluation, you know, even if there was a deed restriction regarding businesses there, that wouldn't have any impact on this variance.
Story came in, that house that's being built now on the south end of that group, that had always
North
been,
end.
south end,
South end of Frank Rendon.
yeah, the street.
Yeah.
That was always
The new one. Oh,
next to the condo. Everybody thought that the condo was gonna go to the north,
Yeah.
taking that, that's what it came up about 5 years ago.
Okay.
It was a deed restriction of the developer. 'Cause
Yeah.
I've done deed restrictions in my property, and you know, they're only as good as the,
I'll talk to you after that. I'd like to see that. Because I've heard of it, you know, ever since I've been here.
thank you.
Were there any comments by the neighbors in the city? Well, we'll get to that in a minute.
Oh, yeah?
Not yet.
Okay, sorry.
That comes a little further down the agenda. At first, we asked for applicant presentation.
Good morning. My name is Christopher Bump. I'm a general contractor, and I'm hoping to build a house for Chaya and Kieran, the two. And this would be a residence that they would use. I mean, they wouldn't use it for any rental property or anything like that, or, you know, it would never be leased out. It would just be for them and their immediate family. And when they bought the property, they had seen that the structure that was demolition was using more of the property than what they're requesting to use, so they thought that they were gonna be able to do this without having to get a variance, but, you know, since we proposed it, we found out that the 10-foot setback, which the other structure didn't meet, that, you know, we were beyond that.
Do we have any questions for the applicant? Thank you.
Thank you.
The next item would be if public has any input in favor of the project.
In favor. In favor.
I'm having a hard time hearing, I'm sorry.
Seeing none, then we go to asking for input opposed to the project.
Heard that. Is it okay if I remove my mask?
See your name and address.
My name is Lisa Park, P-A-R-K. My address is 2709 South Atlantic Avenue, Daytona Beach Shores. My home is directly to the north of the subject property. I have a few pictures, if I may share, and I don't know that I got enough copies, and I apologize.
You guys want to share? You guys may have to share.
Yeah, no problem.
Okay, stop.
Excuse me, thank you all for the opportunity to speak before you. As I said before, my name is Lisa Park. I've been a resident of Volusia County since 1989. I've lived within 2 miles of this very spot since 1995. I'm a certified public accountant practicing in Volusia County since 1993. I want to point out the applicant acquired this property in January of this year. knowing that it was a 50-foot wide property, 350 plus feet. My property is 50 foot wide also, and similar in length. The picture on page 1 is my home. And what I want to point out in that is, in the applicant's the application, they state that they want to have a 2-car garage, and that's one of the reasons for the width. And my home is 28 feet wide. I have a 2-car garage, plenty of room for a door on the left. Had I designed the home was built in 1970. Had I designed a home, I would have put a door over there, and I would have probably used the other 2 feet. But my purpose in this is twofold. One is to show you that you can have a 2-car, actually have a 4-car garage, because it goes into the dune, but it does have 2 larger than normal garage doors. So my point here is you can build a 30-foot wide home on these 50-foot wide lots and have 2-car garages plus an entryway and a foyer. But I'll get back to that in a moment. 2711 has not had a structure on it, as they said, for at least 15 years. I think referring to what was on there 15 years ago is inappropriate, because who knows back then what all the land zoning rules were, whether it was constructed to meet those. Times change in 15 years. So this has been a vacant property for 15 years. And I did know that at some point something would be nearby, but I expected it to meet the requirements, the 10-foot setback. In comment to Mr. Lilly's question, the house to the north of me was an Airbnb up until November, when it was acquired by someone from Orlando. They've assured me it will not be an Airbnb, but who knows? I had new neighbors every single week. I'm not a fan. One of the things I want to point out is there is a 10-foot setback at this point. They want to do 6.5 feet. And I think from the pandemic, all of us know what 6 feet is because of the little foot marks in the grocery store now stay 6 feet away from everybody. But my arm span is 5'6". So it's only 1 foot wider than this is what they want to build from the property line. And in their drawings, they have a cantilever area that comes out 2 feet, which then would mean from my property line, it would only be 4.5 feet. So as I would walk down my property line, I would have this cantilever, outcropping that would only be 4.5 feet. So I just don't understand why it's necessary to grant such a variance when you can construct something within 30 feet. That 30-foot allotment. When I acquired my home, one of my home builders came and had stated that he was actually considering buying the property next door and building on it, and said that he could build quite a home with the 30-foot width. That was not going to be a constraint because of the length of the property. You can do so much. Now, my major concern is, in that picture you'll see, you come off A1A into my drive, and because it's into the dune, the 2 side properties on both sides are higher than mine. So on both sides, if you go to the other pictures, on page 2, as you come in my driveway, there's a coquina rock retaining wall that starts, and then it grows, and then it becomes a cement block retaining wall that holds back that side property. And that is right on the property line from what I can tell. It's kind of hard other than from the aerial view I can see it. It's on both sides. Also, my garage or my basement is underground also. So both the wall and my garage, and I double checked this morning before I left, are perfect. There is not even a hairline crack in either one of them. So my concern is that if they construct on this property and they come any closer than the 10 feet, and I talked to one of my engineering clients, And he said there is a valid concern because he was going into all kinds of things about a 45-degree pressure or something. Sure, I can speak to that, but is the closer they come, the more pressure it could potentially put on those retaining walls or on my garage wall, and concern over the any kind of injury to it, and who's going to be responsible for that. At 10 feet, that's the zoning. I can't do anything about it. 6.5. If there is an issue, then I would think that I would have some kind of legal ramifications. And again, that's because I'm concerned about the structures being compromised by more close construction to it. Aesthetic-wise, I'm not crazy about it, but it is what it is. They can go whatever they like. I don't like the look of Wilbur by the Sea, where every house is, you know, within not even probably an arm's length of each other. But and this isn't how I wanted to meet my neighbors, by the way. I would rather not be here. I have tax returns to do. You know, had they owned the property for a longer period of time, I could understand, because then, you know, there might be some hardship in this particular case, but they just acquired the property knowing what they were getting, you know, versus if they had owned it in a tornado or hurricane, fire, that wiped out the prior structure, and now they needed to rebuild. I know sometimes there are rules about that, but that's not the case. So the facts are, you can build a two-car garage with a doorway, and actually many of the houses across on the other side are like that, because I had actually looked at buying one of those. They acquired the property in January 2021. There is no assurance that what they gave you as a drawing is what they want if they build on the property. Once they have the 6.5-foot adjustment, they could sell it shortly thereafter. Who knows that they'll actually reside in it. And they may intend to, but you never know. Things change. Yes, it would dwarf my house with a 10-foot setback, but that is what it is. But with 6.5 now, you're bringing it closer, and the 3-story of it is going to overshadow. It will create a wind tunnel effect when we get those northeasters, which could damage my landscaping down along the side, which could be an issue. And then again, my garage and retaining wall. And then as I read their application,
Can I ask for a quick summary? We were supposed to have a 3-minute total.
oh, I'm sorry.
And that we're running
Okay,
about
quick
6.
summary is, as I read their application, everything is they want, or they desire. And a want and a desire is not a hardship or a direct need. It is just that, it's a wish. I see nothing in that they have incurred any kind of hardship in this particular case that would allow them this 6.5-foot setback versus a 10-foot setback. Nor do I see any reason that they would require any kind of relief in this. You know, they refer to their age being a factor. Age is not a factor. Their enjoyment of the beach. I want to enjoy the beach, but it's not. That's not the purpose here. The purpose is will it affect the other homes in the area? And yes, it will.
Thank you.
I'm sorry.
Does the applicant have any rebuttal?
You know, we won't impact her walls or her structure in any way. And the neighbor to the south, his house is 6.5 feet from the property line right now. And he's got a wall that's on the property line that, you know, intrudes on any kind of, you know, use like concerns this lady. And I just wanted, you know, to assure if there is any I'm a general contractor, and we're not going to change the grade of the lot. So there's not going to be any further impact on our house as far as weight or the degree of slope or anything like that. We're going to maintain the grade that's there. And is there any other question that?
Any other questions or comments from the board?
No.
Not for him.
Okay.
I get a little nervous, so I apologize.
What? Not from him, the other either.
Ready?
We're supposed to motion first and then have a discussion.
What?
We're supposed to motion. Discussion.
Make a motion.
Okay, that will close the hearing. We're going to have discussion. Any discussion by the board members about this issue?
Well, kind of a question as far as the criteria, you met all, according to your staff, you met all 7 criteria. And some of the questions that was brought up fell in within that criteria mode. So that would, my only concern is that while there are legitimate questions, apparently our staff felt that it met the criterias.
That's right.
So that is staff's opinion after doing the analysis. You know, obviously there was new information provided today. The board, you know, ultimately, and John can speak to this, you know, is has to make its own finding when it comes to this quasi-judicial hearing. You would have to basically take into consideration what staff has said and what the owner and what the neighbor has said, and essentially, you know, make your own findings. Essentially, if there's a specific question for me, I can go ahead and try to answer that.
No question. I think it's a beautiful property that they're planning and building. And I'd like to make a motion.
Any further discussion?
I'll make it out.
Okay,
I'll
motion.
do the motion.
I'd like to make a motion to approve zoning variance application ZV 1017, Chahaya Nathu, residence 2711 South Atlantic Avenue.
Thank you. Any second?
I'll second it.
Sherry?
What you want to discussion?
Ms. Tornatori?
Yes.
Mr. Delage?
Yes.
Mr. Horian?
Yes.
Mr. Lilly?
No.
Mr. Schmitz?
Yes.
Discussion.
Are you going to be in town for the next meeting?
Depends on when the next
Because if
meeting.
it's going to be an extra hour, I probably will go out of town.
We're gonna go out of town. Any other board comments besides that one?
No, I think she covered it.
Take your pen back.
Did you do what I said?
In that case,